This experiment would not be happening without a lot of collaboration between organizations, ONRC at the University of Washington, DNR, Forest Service, and so on. This is a short list. We're really looking to expand and bring in new collaborators, and this is a presentation today is part of the effort to do that. Here's where we stand. This idea for this study was conjured up not too long after I arrived at ONRC in 2016, and we were able to put together a study proposal floated by several stakeholder groups who gave it enough support that DNR put its weight behind the idea. It took us a while, but we got some funding from the Washington legislature in 2019, and we're hoping for some continuing funding this year. This last year has really been about thinking about what the study will look like and whether it really was feasible as an operational scale study, and this is largely completed, which allowed us to bring in principal investigators and who have been actively engaged since October or so. And so today is our rollout, and you'll see a number of presentations and attempts to engage with you. We're going to do future Zoom calls in more detail. We're going to complete study plans, do pre-treatment monitoring, and start implementing the timber sales soon. The study was framed around a new goal framework, which we call ecosystem sustainability. It's, you've heard in some of the presentations, some mention of this. The idea is that community well-being and environment well-being can be put on the same playing field, and that together we want to look at the whole set of effects, not just one, then the other, that sort of approach. This concept was developed by the Washington Rural Ecosystem Sustainability Team, which is a group of faculty and students at the University of Washington working through ONRC. The ecosystem we're talking about here is the OESF itself, and you can see on the left the boundary of this defined ecosystem. Central to this ecosystem are the reddish areas, which is the DNR trust lands, and this is where the experiment is being conducted. We have a rather long study question. Will a higher sustainable level of both of kinds of well-being emerge from an array of trials, essentially? There's kind of an easier version of this question I'm going to throw up in front of you and ask you to focus more on this. Basically, do we want to try to expand the DNR toolbox? Some historical background. Looking at the trust lands within the OESF, this is the historical harvest data. And as you can see, 65 to 1990, there was very, very high levels of wood production that occurred through the trust land area. And since then, harvest levels have been very low relative to that previous activity. This has resulted in a distribution of stand ages that you see in the bottom here. So the majority of stands end up being dense conifer, 30 to 50 years old, with some different kinds of older forests at a smaller percentage. One of the things we're really interested in the study is to provide information that could improve sustainable harvest calculations. So there's a whole lot of things that go into those calculations, and some of the things we're doing will, we hope, be considered in the next versions of the calculation. So how are we going to expand the toolbox? This is the T3 watershed experiment design. It involves three different scales, that of whole watersheds, operational areas, and some smaller scale stuff. In terms of the whole watersheds, we are looking at 4 different treatments, experimental treatments. What we're calling alternative 1 and alternative 2 are the new tools, or include the new tools that we want to check out, and we want to compare them to the current or standard tools that have been implemented through the OESF land plan. We also include control watersheds where there's no entry. We can track background changes here. People may also consider this a some stakeholders may consider this a strategy, something like a carbon park, for example. I am not going to talk about the prescriptions in this presentation. We're going to go into those in subsequent ones. But there's 12 different prescriptions to be looked at. The strategies, the new tools are really drawn from a number of different sources, and I think this is important to point out. So some of them come from the scientific debate that's been going on in the last 20 years. And these include discussions about, whether or not to actively enter riparian areas to do active restoration. Secondly, early seral conditions, early seral plants and animals, it's been becoming more and more clear that these areas have been declining because of the focus on older forests, and also the effectiveness of intensive management has reduced and diminished the time and space for early seral species. I'll talk more about this. And then we also want to look into speeding late seral structures in these younger stands through different kinds of thinnings and other practices. The second source of inspiration really has come from listening to the community. And we've done this through a variety of methods. There's a number of students, Courtney amongst them, who have been doing formal interviews. And there'll be more of this work done. Brian Pellick will be doing more as well. You may hear from them. I'm not going to talk much about what they're doing, but some of the clear messages that we've received are growing riparian red alder could help a struggling hardwood industry, could have various environmental improvements. So that's one. Growing red cedar greatly diminished from its historic prevalence, and it's very highly valued by just about everybody. Also, the same could be said about elk and elk forage. So these are kind of some of the messages. We tried to develop some prescriptions around all of these concepts above. The resulting design or layout includes 16 watersheds, the red lines here. These are on DNR trust lands. The total acres of these watersheds is about 20,000, and they were assembled into blocks of the most similar watersheds, and then treatments were randomly applied. The 4 watershed treatments were randomly applied. That's the basic design. In terms of what we want to follow, we want to go beyond looking at just revenue for trust beneficiaries and environmental or environmental issues that are focus of the HCP. We want to look at this ecosystem well-being concept. So we have a broader list of things we're interested in, and I'm not going to go through this whole list, but that includes viable salmon populations in the streams themselves. One of the advantages of this study is that all these watersheds have fish in them, so we can monitor them directly. And there's a lot of economic considerations we're interested in too. I'll just go through these really quickly. Shendor Toth at UW is going to take the lead on looking at the new kinds of ways of looking at the economic effects of these treatments. Just go through them. It'll include things like the costs and benefits of avoided litigation if we can do that, and basically come up with some hypothesized economic effects of the different treatments.